Welcome to another edition of Data Dig with Northeast Ohio Media Group's data guru, Rich Exner. I'm Mark Naymik, a columnist, and we're going to talk about a recent story about Cleveland's consent decree. It's the agreement they signed with the Department of Justice, spelling out what needs to happen within the police department. Rich, a lot of people have been wondering, well, how much will this cost? And I know as they were thinking about it, you were actually digging into it. What did you find?
What's interesting about this consent decree is it's 105 pages, all sorts of details of what the City of Cleveland Police Department needs to do. There's not a single dollar sign in there, so we wanted to get a little bit of an idea of how much it's going to cost.
Well, we know other cities that have gone through it are still adding up those numbers because these things are spread out over years, and the figures really aren't set. We don't have any touch point, plus each agreement is very specific to that city. So what factors did you look at first before you even applied numbers? What's in our agreement that has to be tallied?
There are certain things, there are certain requirements of people they have to hire, offices they have to set up. There has to be a monitor that's going to look at this thing, provide reports, report to the court. That's going to be a highly qualified person that doesn't have previous ties to the police department. So you have to break down, type of number of employees or new positions, and I know that there is an examination of staffing levels the city's going to assess and turn in. That could affect it. What else is in there? Well, there's a lot of things that's going to be hard to tabulate, but it's going to be our job to keep a close watch on. For instance, every time a police officer uses use of force, there now has to be a written report completed by the end of the shift of not only the officer involved, but every officer that witnessed it. That can be overtime, and that can be $40 an hour per person that has to sit around and do that. Every time a citizen wants to file a complaint against an officer, the officer is required to summon their supervisor to the scene, and at the scene help out that citizen fill out the report. That's taking that person away from other duties. So those are a little bit harder costs to get to. What's going to be a little bit easier, they have to set up an inspector general's office for the police department. Just for the comparison, Cuyahoga County spends about $1 million a year for its inspector general's office. They have to set up a monitor's office to watch over this entire thing. Other cities that had to have a monitor's office through one of these decrees, $1 million to $2 million a year. So you can start seeing where it adds up pretty quickly.
Is there any hard cost to the transparency that is supposed to be very prevalent throughout the agreement, that we're going to get access to records, that they have someone watching records specifically? Again, that's probably a soft cost. It's hard to look at, but what do you see?
It's a soft cost. It's going to definitely be there. And it's going to be a little bit difficult to get to it from the outside at this point without knowing the details involved. But we do know that in Seattle, they track costs pretty closely, and all their costs associated with their consent decree is adding up to about $6 million a year. And that's just things they've identified that they can identify.
That's per year.
Per year. And these things last a while. 5 years, the consent decree. People predict these things don't get over with in 5 years. It's more like maybe 10 years. But New Orleans, a city about the size of Cleveland, $55 million is what they're guessing they're going to spend over the first 5 years alone.
Let's just circle back for a minute to equipment. Now, a number of pieces of equipment have to be replaced anyway. The city police union has complained for years that they lack cars, computers, and updated technology. So, some of that will be easy to track, but how much of that will be really related to the consent decree or things that they needed to do anyway, and how will you sort through that?
That's going to be pretty difficult to say. Is it something they would have bought anyway? But we do know they have 600 plus police cars in the city. If they just replace 5% of them, if they're short 30 cars, right there, just to buy the cars, you're talking almost $1 million. And then you have to add in all the special police equipment. The computers that you alluded to, the requirements, or the decree just says you have to have the top computers so they can keep track of 911 calls and everything from the car. Starting price, you're looking at $5,000 a car, and then it goes way up from there. So there's lots of dollars involved here. As you point out, some of this money would have been spent absent a decree anyway, so that's where it's going to get a little dicey to separate the two.
I know I've asked Mayor Jackson in previous interviews about how he plans to pay for it. He's always said he wanted to wait and see what the agreement said, and then they would look at it, and they'd look at it year by year. And in those discussions, there are some federal grants that already exist that they could apply for that might be able to be applied to certain purchases, but it really feels like a drop in the bucket compared to what the city's going to have to absorb. Recently, the city council was briefed by the police, and of course they were asking about costs, and some of them, our council members, are leery of it. You will stay on top of it, obviously.
One quick point on grants, if it's federal grants get involved. I understand that's a cost minimization for Cleveland. The way I kind of look at these things, it's still taxpayer money one way or the other. Whether it originated in Cleveland, originated in the state of Ohio, originated with the federal government, it's tax dollars involved. So I tend to look at it all the same.
Agreed, but I think this the city will argue at least it's not coming off of those immediate books.
Right.
And those costs, according to the mayor and others, say, look, the federal dollars that are flowing back in have at least been spread out by a much broader group to help cities like Cleveland. So we'll see. We will follow up. We'll certainly do another show on this topic. Again, I'm Mark Naymik, and this is Rich Exner. Thanks for joining.